Good evening. Welcome to the October 4th meeting of the Newmarket Town Council. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, sorry for the late start. We had a few technical difficulties, but we'll now begin with public forum.
Actually, Mr. Chair, before you do that, could we have a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public session?
Thank you. Could we have a motion to seal the minutes for the non-public?
So moved. Second.
Call the roll.
Councilor Burns.
Aye.
Councilor Finch.
Aye.
Councilor Thompson.
Aye.
Councilor Cast.
Aye.
Councilor Bowden.
Aye.
Councilor Weinstein.
Aye.
Councilor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Is there anybody here to make a comment for the public forum? Please come forward.
I have some material. Should I wait till everybody has one, or should I just go ahead and get started?
You could start.
Okay. Good evening. I've timed this to 5 minutes and 10 seconds, so I'm going to try to hurry up here. My name is Monica Christopoli, and I've lived in Newmarket for the past 2 years with my husband and our 5-year-old son. I teach at Great Bay Community College, and Wednesday nights are grading nights, so I apologize that I'm going to talk and then leave. I'm here to tell you about 2 Newmarket events and then 1 event outside of Newmarket that's related to the 2 first events. I think you might be interested in all 3. The first flyer on top of your packet invites you to an October 23rd Mindful Mondays event at the Stone Church. Some of you guys got the end of my ink in the printer, sorry about that. Mindful Mondays is a monthly lecture series that's been around for half a year, and that happens the 3rd or 4th Monday of each month. It was started by one of the Stone Church bartenders and a Stone Church regular to focus community attention on issues of environmental and social justice. I volunteered to coordinate the events, and we've covered an array of topics from stories of transgender students and professors at UNH to combating seacoast water contamination from Pease and the Coakley landfill. Tony Weinstein has actually come to some of these events, and she might actually present at one of them, either on your town deliberative session or on town voting day. So please feel warmly invited to all future Mindful Mondays. If you put that aside, the next flyer underneath is related to but separate from Mindful Mondays, and we'll take a little bit more background explanation. The flyer invites you to a free October 22nd, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Community Rights Awareness Workshop catered at the Stone Church and put on by something called the New Hampshire Community Rights Network. NHCRN is one of 5 community rights networks across the country. These networks partner with a small nonprofit law firm called the Community Environmental Legal Defense Fund, or CELDEF for short. These 2 groups have been part of 2 of our Mindful Mondays events, including September's, when we featured a documentary about their work. Together, NHCRN and CELDEF help towns across New Hampshire enact something called rights-based ordinances to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the town's community members. There are currently 12 of these RBOs across the state. To give you a close-to-home example, Nottingham's RBO has, for the past 10 years, prevented USA Springs from depleting the town's water aquifer and drawing contaminants into the townspeople's wells. When going the route of protesting in court and via the permitting process did not work to keep out USA Springs, the town's rights-based ordinance did. A group of us here in Newmarket are interested in establishing a proactive RBO to prepare for NIMBY, which is not in my backyard, but also next it might be you. Point in case RBO history tells us that had Durham had an RBO protecting the rights of the Great Bay and its townspeople, the town would have had an exponentially greater chance of preventing Eversource from putting energy lines through the bay either at all, or at least not in the form originally proposed. Because when corporations see these RBOs, they either pull out of projects, scale them back, or go bankrupt trying to fight them, which is the case for USA Springs and Nottingham. It has gone bankrupt trying to fight the RBO. If this piques your interest, please join us on the 22nd. CELDEF's New Hampshire community organizer, Michelle Sanborn, will walk us through what our community rights to local self-government look like in New Hampshire and why something called the box of allowable activism blocks us from determining what actually goes into our own literal own backyards. That box is made up of 4 walls. I'll go over them quickly. When citizens propose locally focused laws that interfere with for-profit interests, they get trumped by state preemption. When they request project delays or cancellations, they are denied by the permitting process. That gives corporations stamps of approval. When citizens propose that protection of communities and people should be more important than profit, they are overridden by corporate privilege and personhood. And fourthly, when citizens suggest that it is a myth that nature is property, they are ignored because currently nature is considered property. So if after the October 22nd workshop enough Newmarket residents are interested in stepping out of that ineffective box, we will start the process for a Newmarket rights-based ordinance, and we'd love for all of you to be part of it from the start. Then lastly, the flyer at the very bottom of your packet is for something called Democracy School. It will be on October 13th and 14th before the workshop in Newmarket. It comes to you by way of Nottingham, where the town is again working with NHCRN and CELDF to enact a new RBO 10 years after its first. As part of the town's education regarding this effort and community rights in general, the town is putting on CELDF's Democracy School so that citizens can better understand how the system of law we live under protects corporate rights over people's and ecosystems' rights, but also how communities like Nottingham have asserted local control in order to protect themselves against resulting harmful corporate activities. I should note that the registration for the Democracy School is the end of tomorrow, but if you emailed the contact person and let her know your registration and your check were coming, she'd let you in. That event does cost $25, but the awareness workshop that's happening in Newmarket on the 22nd is free. I will be at all 3 of these events. I mostly and truly hope that you guys will come to the October 22nd Community Rights Awareness Workshop, where we're going to hopefully start the process for a Newmarket rights-based ordinance. Thank you so much. I don't know if you take questions or not.
I don't know. I think generally it's just a public comment.
Awesome. I'm sorry to talk and dash, but I have to go grade. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Molly.
Good night.
Seeing nobody else at the microphone, closed public forum at 7:25. Move on to acceptance of minutes. Could I have a motion to accept the minutes from the September 20th non-public meeting?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from the September 20th non-public meeting.
Second?
Any corrections or comments? If so, we'll need to go into non-public.
No. So it's a public session. There was no non-public at the last meeting. Right?
No, there
It
was.
says here, there was a non-public.
Was there? I
Yes.
thought we canceled it.
No.
We had
that-
non-public
Okay.
with Terry.
Oh, yes, that's right, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah. Getting mine mixed up, yeah.
I see no corrections, so we can call the roll.
My fault. Counselor Burns.
Abstain.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Abstain.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0 to 2.
Could I have a motion to accept the minutes of the September 20th regular meeting minutes, please?
So moved.
Second?
Does anyone have corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Counselor Burns.
Abstain.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0 to 1.
We'll move on to the report of the town administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My report's going to be brief this evening because we have the Community Development Director here who will be discussing the capital improvement plan with the council. First, I did want to let the council know that the chiefs and I have begun meeting with representatives from the town of Newfields to provide, provide dispatching services to that community once again. I'll keep the council posted, but we are just want to let you guys know we are moving forward with that. They have said it at their meeting, so I want to let you guys know as well. Dubois and King, the town's contracting engineer, has reviewed the punch list of items for the downtown project and feels that the project is complete. NHDOT is going to be coming on site to provide us with a certificate of completion after walkthrough within the next few weeks. I want to make sure our legal counsel's there since we are now in a legal trial with the state DOT, and I'd rather have our attorney present. Whenever we have somebody who is suing us, I always like to have somebody else, our attorney there, and they will be there. I attached to my report this evening the outline for the New Hampshire Municipal Association's annual conference that will be held November 15th and 16th in Manchester. If anyone's interested in attending, please let me know and we can register you to attend. If you notice, two of the speakers this year are myself and the superintendent of schools to discuss sharing services between the two. So I actually got a lot of people already emailing me about that, from that. Not on my written report, but I did want to make the council aware because it goes along sort of with a resolution on the agenda for the first reading. As the council knows, the school district has begun renovating their suite of offices upstairs, and when they opened the walls, they found live knob and tube wiring from the original construction.
Still live even?
Yes. We have investigated and found
Actually,
considerable
it's
amount more.
scary, but it's cool.
Yeah, and we found a considerable amount more in this building. The facilities director and building inspector says this does pose a concern for safety of the building. The facilities director is going to talk to the electrician to work on removing that from because odds are it doesn't stop on the top floor, it comes all the way down, so we're going to get a price to fix that as well. So, just want to let the council know that.
We just disconnected, it can stay there.
Well, that's what
Doesn't
we're
hurt anything,
trying to
just-
find out. Go ahead, if you have a question.
Cut the darn wires.
Well, we
You
can't
gotta pull
quite
them out of there, I mean,
cut-
you gotta.
We can't just cut the wires because they're actually still feeding things that are operating, so.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's been kind of the interesting part. When we opened up the wall, we found that the lighting in the school department's offices were still operated
Off the
by
knob
knob
and
and tube and switches
No
that were still in
kidding.
place. We then further traced some more wiring, found there's receptacles that are still tied in, and some stuff we haven't been able to get to yet. So there's quite a bit of it still active. So I would love to just cut it and be done with
I
it.
know,
but
I'm just.
I think someone's going to
I
get
was
mad at me
kidding.
someplace
No,
for doing
I
that.
know, you gotta get it out of there.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just wanted to-
Wow.
Wow.
So we don't
sorry,
really
I
know the
know.
whole scope yet
I'm
because
glad
we don't know
found
where it
I
all
think
is.
It's cool. I just like it. I would have thought it would have all gone by now, so
Yeah.
I'm amazed, and it's cool stuff.
Yes,
Oh.
it's still
It's
there.
vintage, I know.
From the early 1900s.
Yeah.
And still works.
Yeah. Sorry.
But, so I just wanted to let the council be aware of that.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to turn this over to the Community Development Director to go over the CIP. Oops.
Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
Before? Because just about the annual conference. So I've had the opportunity to go, I think, 3 years now. And I really recommend it if you can make it work with your schedule. And I looked through some of the topics, and a lot of them are just really timely about energy and obviously about sharing services. And there are some really it's a great networking opportunity, so I definitely recommend going if you can. That's all.
I actually was planning on going, and I just got called for grand jury service the week before, and I can't be out of work for 2 solid weeks. It's just not gonna, never mind a week. So I'm
Right.
like, well, something's gotta give, but yeah, it does look good.
If you just want to email me if you want to attend, just let me know and we'll take care of that.
Sorry.
And now, Community Development Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fournier. Good evening, members of the Town Council. I'm here this evening to present to you an overview of the town's CIP process. As you probably know, I work with the CIP committee, and they've been very hard at work and have completed their capital improvements program for you, which I believe you all received in your packet. And these are recommendations that are presented from the committee. And after I go over my quick PowerPoint presentation, I'll quickly go over the forms that we have and what this means so that you can prepare yourself for your own budget process. So I'd like to start off with an introduction, if you will. What I'd like to attempt to do this evening is explain to you what a CIP capital improvements program is, what the benefits are, the legal framework, define what is a capital project versus capital equipment, and what our CIP process is here currently in Newmarket, and what the relationship is with our town's master plan. The CIP is a long-range planning document, and it outlines anticipated expenditures for projects and equipment over a period of at least 6 years. It implements the town's long-term planning goals with specific facility projects, improvements, and programs. It's aimed at increasing the town's infrastructure to accommodate future growth and development. It links local capital investments in infrastructure with land use planning and economic development. There are numerous benefits to having a capital improvements program. First of all, it provides, protects public health, safety, and welfare, which is something that's...
Just click on that right there. Just tap, just hit the mouse pad, the pad. There you go.
Sorry.
Yeah. There you go.
I have a screen that I use. Okay. So it also anticipates the demands of growth, improves communication between town departments so you don't have duplication of services and goods, avoids undue property tax increases, supports economic development, and provides a foundation for growth management and impact fees. The legal framework, as you all know, in New Hampshire, municipalities are creatures of the state. Everything we do has to be enabled by the state statutes, our revised statutes annotated. And municipalities who have adopted a master plan, which we have here in Newmarket, are authorized to prepare a capital improvements program for a period of at least 6 years. That's under RSA 674-5. A CIP is based on information that's provided by the town's departments and the agencies of the city. In this case, the school district would be part of that. It takes into account public facility needs, as indicated in the master plan, and classifies projects according to urgency and provides a time sequence for the implementation of the projects. In our process, we have identified a prioritization system for projects ranging from inconsistent to urgent, and you'll see that in the forms that we'll be looking at a little later on. The CIP strives for an annual level of capital expenditures to provide affordable level of tax expenditures to keep the tax rate relatively stable from year to year. It requires that the CIP is related to the goals of the master plan and the recommendations of the master plan. The CIP is part of the town's budget process, and I've sort of just created a flow chart there where the town administrator prepares his budget. It then goes to the town council, budget committee, and then ultimately to our town meeting in March. Under the RSA, the CIP is to submit its recommendations to the town council and the budget committee as part of the annual process. Bear in mind, however, that the CIP is an advisory document only. One of the requirements here in New Hampshire to have impact fees is you have to have a CIP enacted according to the state statute. And Newmarket does have an impact fee ordinance. And for those of you who are new to the concept, impact fees are charges that are imposed against new developments to account for the cost of capital improvements that are necessary to necessitate those development. And here in Newmarket, we charge impact fees for recreation, public schools, water, and sewer facilities. Our town charter establishes that we create a capital improvements committee to prepare the CIP. And that is in the charter, and it's basically totally an 8-member committee. There's representatives from the town council, the planning board, the budget committee, the school board, and 2 at-large members. And in the charter, that committee is charged with preparing the CIP, and they are granted all the powers under the New Hampshire statute for the committee that puts the document together. Here in Newmarket, we have 2 different types of CIP requests. We have capital equipment requests that's defined as a purchase of a tangible item that's non-reoccurring, has a useful life of more than 3 years, and an aggregate cost of at least $10,000. We also have a capital improvement project which is defined as one that enhances infrastructure and public facilities with a useful life of more than 10 years and a total cost of at least $50,000. Examples of capital improvement projects: upgrading your wastewater treatment plant, acquiring new well sites, reconstruction of roadways, upgrading the town's stormwater system, ADA accessibility improvements to town facilities and school facilities. And it can also be used for what we refer to in the business as soft costs: engineering studies, master plans, conceptual design, cost estimates. So it doesn't have to be a tangible item. For equipment, we use these funds for replacement of police vehicles, purchase of fire equipment and protective gear, dispatch equipment and radios, playground equipment, and public works equipment, including dump trucks, snow plows, sweepers, vacuum trucks, and that sort of gives you an overview of the range of activities. Under the RSAs, it's very important that there be a relationship, if you will, between the CIP and the master plan. And I don't know if all of you have participated in our planning process here in Newmarket, but our master plan is really the foundation. It's the blueprint for the future, and it represents a collective vision that the residents and planning board members and key stakeholders in the process have for Newmarket, is articulated through a series of public meetings and comments that have been solicited through the planning process. And the goals and the recommendations of the master plan are reflected in a vision statement. And some of you, Tony, I know you were there, I think maybe Amy, no? We did a visioning process a couple of years ago, and and Dale, thank you. And we were able to pull together some goals and recommendations and policies, and that really became the framework, if you will, for our future land use plan that we developed as the next step in the master planning process. And what this just illustrates is the connection between the master plan and CIP projects. And I'm just putting this up, I'm not going to go over each and every one, but just to give you an idea of the connections. And what I'd like to do is include this as part of the document this year so that people will have an understanding of how these fit into the overall planning scheme that we have here in town. Recreation, water, wastewater, municipal buildings, public works, library, of course our dam, the Callan Dam, and our dispatch equipment. The CIP process usually begins in the summer. In early August, the planning department and the town administrator send out a request for proposals to the town departments requesting that they prepare their 6-year CIP program for the year. In September, the CIP committee convenes to review the proposals, and typically the CIP committee will conduct a site visit of the town's facilities to acquaint themselves with the projects, and they invite each of the department heads, including the schools, to come to a meeting to present their proposals. The CIP committee studies each project and then prepares its recommendations that are included in the CIP, as well as specific allocations for the upcoming budget. The CIP committee then forwards its recommendations to the town administrator by October 1st. This year's process, we received 46 proposals for requests for FY 18-19, which is the next fiscal year. And the town department requests were almost $2 million. And the school request was a little bit over $1 million. And their 6-year plan included the debt service on the bond issue from last year's bond vote. The CIP committee recommended for the town pretty much that most of the projects be funded because they were all very worthwhile and needed, and recommended the school requests in the amount asked for a grand total of approximately $3 million. At this point, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and then I would like to kind of walk you through the booklet so you understand how it's presented and what it means. And so I'd be happy to answer any questions on the first part of the presentation if you have any.
Well, seeing no other questions, I have one. So how do you kind of figure out, you know, the examples of things that would be let me go back to make sure I have the terminology right, but a capital improvement project. You know, you gave some examples of reconstruction of roadways, but where is the line always clear between what is a capital improvement project and what is maintenance?
Okay. Well, maintenance is not a capital improvement project. Maintenance is something that should be included in the town's operating budget. And Greg, I think, is probably going to talk a little bit about some of his recommendations along those lines. But maintenance is maintenance. Maintenance does not belong in a CIP budget.
Right.
Because a capital budget is...
But replacement of a roof is on there, and to some extent, replacement of a roof could be either, and if it was a small amount of roof, maybe you wouldn't put it in a CIP.
Right. But as part of your capital planning process, you should account for roofs are good for how many years? 30 years?
25 to 30.
25 to 30 years. So in developing a plan, you should have built in an allocation over the course of 25 to 30 years of money that you should be setting aside in your capital reserve fund. So when the time comes to replace that roof, you have the funding in hand to do so. That doesn't mean that you're not going to do any maintenance on that roof in the interim, but the idea is if you keep up with the payments and if you keep up with the maintenance, then the town should be in a good financial position to move forward with that expenditure when the time comes.
I want to use this opportunity too to sort of separate the mindset of two things: the capital reserve funds from the capital improvement plan. For a long time, this community interchanged the two words. They would say, "Oh, we're putting money into the CIP." You don't put money into a CIP. You put money into capital reserve funds. In addition, capital reserve funds are not the only way to fund projects. For example, if we wanted to fund the replacement of a roof as part of a larger maintenance thing, we could go out and bond it, or we could just increase the budget for that 1 year to do so. Too often, everyone's mindset is the capital reserve fund is the CIP. It's not. Capital reserve funds is a mechanism to save money. That's it.
And the capital, the CIP is not the place where we try to make it's not the place where a deliberation or there's nothing in there indicating that where some of these things, you know, whether it's the dam or something else, whether in the end we would choose to fund that through a bonding process.
That's correct. The town council does that as part of their budget process.
If you look at the forms that are created for the capital improvement projects, there is a section where we ask the department heads to tell us, what is your financing plan? How are you going to fund these improvements? And there's different categories: the general fund, capital reserve funds, federal or state grants, fundraising, or other means. So I think that's a really good point, that a capital reserve fund is a mechanism by which you finance and fund a capital improvement project. Okay? Does that help? Do you have more questions, Mr. Pike?
Councilor Thompson, question.
Just a comment to follow up on what you both were talking about. I think the clarification, and I had said it before, between a capital improvement plan, that has nothing to do with the funding, the fungibility, where the funds will come from, or that it has to. And I think a particular peeve of mine in my last year is to try to get it through. I've heard our town administrator get criticized and the council get criticized for cutting the CIP. Well, you don't cut a CIP, it's the plan. We need to know what the overall plan is. But for someone to sit here and, I'm just gonna pick numbers and say, well, the CIP committee recommended, $5 million. And the town administrator cut it to 2, and what isn't gonna get done? All of that can't be done in 1 year. To your point, which I appreciate about bringing up, keeping the taxes level, what can we afford? And I love the prioritization. This has got to get done now, 1, 2, 3, and whatever. So it's a little bit of a pushback on me, understanding the process, to say, hey, it's not that we're sitting here cutting or saying that things can't get done, but fungibility is what we address here, and
You're looking at the
prioritization.
dollars and cents and whether the town can financially afford it this year, if not
Right.
this year, next year, and how are we going to fund it?
And
those are
that-
budgetary decisions.
Right.
But that's different than what the CIP committee does, because their focus is more on planning.
And that's been I guess my beef is that there have been very good people on the CIP committee, but they don't address fungibility. That's
not
not
their
the
role.
test.
Right,
That's correct.
That's my role is to.
And that's you, and
budget.
that's us, and saying,
And-
okay, well, we pulled this down and we pulled that there, but you and we also make those
Yeah.
decisions about, okay, yes, this is in the plan, it needs to get done, but I've heard you say it, oh, we've got 30,000 over here that's already in the budget with the something, 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 so we don't need to use a capital reserve fund to do it. Again, those are separate discussions, and I know I'm beating a dead
Yeah,
horse, but
but
it just, we're not getting that
I'm
point
going to add to
through.
that.
Go ahead.
That, you see that they're recommending $1.9 million in projects for the fiscal year ending 19. I'm going to tell you, because a
That could
little
relate
preview
to
of the budget.
absolutely nothing.
The contribution to capital reserve funds does not equal $1.9 million. However, I'm estimating that we're going to probably do about $1.2 million worth of projects, because we have cash on hand in the capital reserve funds. I think that's what
Right.
everybody gets confused about, and I hear that, they're like,
That's
well, you're not,
correct.
they vilify me because I cut the capital reserve contributions, and I'm like, no, we're still doing the projects, you just don't need the money because we already have it.
Right.
So that's the big
Right.
disconnect here. We're gonna do $1.2 million worth of projects, you just don't need $1.2 million to go in the capital reserve funds.
Right, because it's already there.
Councilor Weinstein.
I just want to say that I agree with that. But I don't know that that's always clear in the
Right.
plan. And the plan has come so far. I mean, I think it was just 2 years ago that this document, or 3 years ago maybe, like this is a relatively new document to have, to be able to look at all of these in one place. And I mean, you spent a lot of time putting this together, so I appreciate that. But I do think that, and this isn't your role, this probably comes from the different directors, that it's not always clear where the money's gonna come from. You know, I'm looking at the bleachers, and I'm guessing that we can pull $10,000 out of the recreation fund. It doesn't have to come from the capital reserve fund, but yet that's how it's stated on the plan.
Right.
So, again, that's not your responsibility.
Well, It's
but-
what again, we're relying on the departments to tell us how they want to fund it, because they're, most knowledgeable what the needs are of their department, and, and it's Steve's role to do the pencil sharpening to make sure
Bring
it
it to the
fits
council and say, this
the
is how we're gonna do
council's
it.
Right.
So,
Well, I
requirements.
think this is a good step here, having this conversation in front of the council. I'm learning, I thank you for the presentation, I learned from the presentation. I've been trying to understand CIP better the last few months, certainly. Met with Phil Mazzaro, who had a strong interest in the CIP, and talked with him. And I think one of the things that shows me that, if I ask the question, and I have asked the question of several people that have been involved with the CIP or continue to be involved with it, or, how do we determine whether for the things that we need to do, should do, are required for the maintenance of the building, are we funding the capital reserve fund for that objective, for that function? Is it adequately funded? And have we been adequately funding the capital reserve funds? And there's quite a lot of variability.
Well, it's a
that-
policy decision, and
Well-
it's a decision that needs to be vetted by the town council to do that balancing act,
Right.
to weigh whether it's reasonable or
But
not.
it's not just a policy decision, it's a question of, are we putting enough money aside to maintain our buildings adequately? I mean, that's kind of a question. I think, I'm not expecting to answer that right now, but I think that's really is something that certainly, the town administrator is trying, the CIP is trying to make that, figure that out. And the town administrator is trying to do that. I think we as a council will spend more time this budget season making sure we understand those kind of answers as well. And I think that's a good transition for it, that's a good direction for us to go in.
I did want to make another comment on the recommendations, if I could, and maybe ask Greg to chime in. And what I wanted to say is the CIP committee goes through each of the requests and establishes the level of priority. And you saw the little matrix with the pyramid showing how that's done. The CIP committee, for the most part, felt that the majority of the projects were necessary or urgent. There were only a few projects that they felt were desirable or could be possibly deferred to a future date, very small amount. And what was suggested by our new facilities director, which is a great idea, is that for these projects that are on the small scale between, say, $10,000 and $50,000 that don't quite meet the criteria for a capital project, that there be some kind of an operational reserve in the budget, the annual budget, that can be drawn upon for those projects. And the CIP committee embraced that idea. They thought it was a great idea. And some of the projects that were deleted from the recommendation, they were hoping could be considered for funding under the other. Did you want to add anything, Greg, to that?
I'll use an example. For example, when we come to the council and ask to withdraw like $7,000 to replace a door, the only reason why we come to the council is because we have to withdraw the money. It's under my spending authority, but I need to get the money from you. And those are the operational maintenance that we shouldn't have to come to the council for to fix things. But we do, because everyone's been putting the money in that capital reserve fund. Big projects should come out of the capital reserve fund. Roofs, replacing windows, furnaces, those projects. Not the small painting, those kind of items.
Which are kind of below line maintenance.
Right.
I have one quick question. I see D and D2 for priority. Is D2 deferrable?
D2 is, we change, what we're using now is the 1 through 6 category that's right on the form.
Okay.
The bottom of the form on page 3, because we had 2 Ds and it was too confusing.
Yeah.
It was a D1 versus D2. So now we're going class 1 projects are urgent, 2 necessary, 3 desirable, 4 deferrable, 5 exploratory, and 6 inconsistent.
But on these forms, it says D2, that's deferrable.
Right.
Okay.
And we asked the department heads to tell us what they think, and then the CIP committee votes to come up with their own rating.
Okay.
So you have a sense of what they feel is important and what is not. Very good question, though. Thank you. Greg, did you want to say something?
I can just probably address that suggestion that was made. I'm finding that there's a lot of those projects that are not in the category of what technically a capital reserve funded project should be, which is at over 50,000. So, and give you an example of, we have a painting project that's $10,000. Well, it's not equipment, and it's not a $50,000 capital expenditure. It's in those in-betweens. That's why you look at those and you say, you need to make a budget line that says, these are for those projects. These are to do those small, under $50,000 type projects that need to be done, but don't fall into either of those categories. And so creating that line to do that is what the goal was by making those suggestions, so that we can start plucking away those little projects.
Council Weinstein?
So that was actually my question. Because don't we have a building maintenance line item?
Not that, no.
We don't at all?
No. We have we have to sort of finagle it between this, like $1,000 here or $1,000 here, and we just try to, usually I'm gonna say, we'll find it, do the project, if it's something we need to do right away, but if it's something we can wait to come to the council to withdraw the money, we'll withdraw the money. And there was a few times I've actually had to, because the project was too big, but it was an emergency, come to the council later and say, can we withdraw the funds from there?
Yeah, but it kind of leads to confusion, because then you end up withdrawing from capital reserve funds things that are really maintenance.
Exactly. And to be honest, the fund was originally set up to do exactly what everybody wants it to do, which is
tell me the projects that you have and put money in there, then withdraw it later. At some point in time, the fund was changed to be, that's your go-to account if you have any projects or anything to fix. So it should be just, it should be just for, okay, we know that in year 5, we're gonna replace the roof. In year 1, we're gonna replace the furnace. In year 3, we're gonna do this, and we're putting money in there, and we'll withdraw at that point, not for the smaller projects that just come up.
I think a great example is you just approved the Sunrise Sunset Center's doors to be replaced. Those are not a capital reserve item, technically, because they don't fall within that. It was a $10,000 job. It's not a $50,000 job, and it's not a $10,000 piece of equipment. It's a door, which does have a long life expectancy, but yet doesn't fall into the other categories. So those are the kind that would fall into that new line item that I've requested, just to cover that stuff, which has to happen.
Councilor Thompson?
So if the project is done either way, let's take the doors.
Mm-hmm.
It's done either way, and we have money. I get that it's clear if you have a building maintenance operating line item, rather than, because you're good, you'll be like, well, I can pull a little out of here and a little out of here, and I didn't buy staples last year, and whatever. So we all know that in the operating budget, there's a little bit of a cushion for things to happen like that. But whether it comes out of that fund, if, going forward, will you still come to the town council and say, we're gonna replace the door, we'd like to replace the doors at the Sunset for a cost of, I'm picking a number, $7,000, or you will just go do it and we will never hear about it?
2 items. 7,000, no.
I-
Because
okay.
it's under my
Pick a-
spending authority.
Pick a bigger number then.
10,000 or 11,000, I
$10,999.
have to come to the council because
Whether it
it's-
comes out of capital reserves
Yep.
or operating budget.
Yep, because it's over, I
So-
can't spend over 10,000, so I still have to go to the council.
Okay, I trust you, but I like knowing on
Yeah.
that stuff, so, okay, thank you.
I think some of those projects will also be identified when we do our monthly reports, where we will be
Right.
listing those projects that got done per month.
I just want to say, you may not come to the council for approval, but you would
You'll know.
obviously let the council know.
You just said, and
Yeah.
he'll put it in his report.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And-
It's not like things
and
are
I-
gonna happen and wouldn't be.
And I don't want
aware
to
of.
make it sound like that the purchasing process will not go through. If the director of facilities has something that's, he can't spend money on and has to come to me, he's still required to get 3 bids, show me the 3 bids, give me all the backup, and then I sign off. We do that for every department for projects, or for purchases that are under. Anything over that amount, it comes to the council.
Councilor Cass?
To me, working with some of the recommendations in more detail that you were explaining in the CIP committee, what's clear to me is we're getting to the point where we have a good CIP, which is our plan to save for acquisition and replacement of assets and equipment. The visibility, no, it's a plan.
It's not, it's a
I said
plan
it's a
on
plan.
what needs to be
I
done, but
said
not
it's
to
a plan.
save for.
It has amounts recommended based on the cost of replacing them.
Okay,
It's a plan. It's definitely a plan. It's not the savings itself.
right,
I understand that.
right.
My point, though, is, it seems like, and what you're trying to address with that recommendation is, there needs to be attention given to maintaining those assets and targeted plan to maintain their value over time, so that then you're not having to come back too early to replace them, or that you're ignoring the maintenance of them.
The Sunrise doors are a great example. The doors went past their useful life. They've got holes in them that rusted. But they're not a $50,000 capital item. Now, if I was doing 80 doors in a facility, that becomes a capital item. These are really operational repairs that fall outside of a regular maintenance item. So for that particular reason, we may paint that door 3 times over its life expectancy. That's our maintenance piece to increase its life expectancy. But there is a point where we have to replace it, but it doesn't fall into that $50,000 category. So we really need to kind of look at those type of projects and say, we've got to hit these projects. They've got to get done, but they don't hit that number. So by creating this other operational repair line item, it gives us the ability to go in and, say, replace those doors without having to rely on a reserve fund, because this becomes part of the operational budget.
Exactly.
So
You're
we.
you're planning the maintenance of the asset as well as you have a plan to, longer term, and from an asset perspective, replacing or acquiring assets.
On your
And they're not
capital
commingled.
plan should be listing things like roof replacements, major electrical projects, those kind of things that you really need to plan for over a long period of time. Those, as it was said in there, those 20, I think it was over 10-year asset piece, that fall into that $50,000 category. So by breaking the buildings down into individual areas, you can now start working on what are those big capital expenditures to regular maintenance expenditures to maintenance. So for instance, painting a room would not be a big capital expenditure. It would be a maintenance item because we're painting it. Now, if we're painting an entire building, that may fall into a capital type expenditure. So it's identifying those, creating that list of which type they are, and then working forward on a plan to hit those. So I think the first step, by getting that operational piece into a budget that says this number is going to be here because we have to do these, is the first step in then creating that piece. And I look at it as really kind of a two-part plan. We have our CIP planning process, but we also have an operational planning process that takes those smaller projects that don't fall into that category and starts breaking those down so that we can start doing those maintenance items that are not routine maintenance, and that's really probably where we need to kind of get the differences. There's maintenance and then there's routine maintenance. Painting a room is a routine maintenance. Painting an entire building is a capital expenditure, but replacing this door here is a maintenance item based on the fact that it is less than the $50,000, but maybe in that it could be a $30,000 project. It still falls into the requirements that I have to have multiple bids, a specification, and that, and you obviously still get notified about it, but it doesn't fall into that $50,000. And those projects kind of get lost sometimes just because they're not detailed. And my plan is to detail all of those projects and create a pretty good-sized spreadsheet that looks at all of your buildings, creates those large capital plans, those maintenance expenditure plans, and looking at what your ongoing maintenance should look like. And that's a longer-term process. It's not something that I can create in 5 minutes, but it's something that we're working towards, and we have started that process. So I think this is your first step in that, and I think it's a great step to really follow through with.
Councilor Meissen?
You basically answered my question, but just for a little more clarification, so when we go to our budget workshop on the 28th and there's a line item introduced for this building maintenance, will there be projects attached to that? Will there be a plan attached to it? Even though it may not be as detailed as you would like it to be, because I would have a hard time saying, sure, with no itemized
I'll give you the
projects.
simplest answer I can give you. Yes.
Good, I like it.
We will identify projects that we're suggesting to be done under that particular line item.
And the CIP committee will recommend some specific projects as well that would be considered under this. What do we call it? The ORR, which stands for Operational Repair and Replacement.
That are
Fund.
part of this plan or
They're
included?
It's outside the plan. It's in the buildings and grounds budget.
They embraced the idea, and they wanted to recommend that the council and the budget process consider it for funding this year, because it made a lot of sense to them, basically.
This is kind of an inside joke, but what he doesn't want to do is call it CIP light.
In another community, we had what we called an operational CIP, which is what we did with that same type of thing, and it basically was a funded money. It's not technically a CIP, but that's what we called it in that community. We're not calling it that here. because it's really an operational repair. And
Don't repeat CIP any more
Yeah.
often.
I'm trying to get people out of
Just
using that term except for the right
don't.
document.
And it's, CIP is really a capital improvement plan.
Right.
It's
It's
not.
just a plan.
That's-
That's it.
That's really what it
It's
is.
just a
You can have a capital improvement project, which is under the capital improvement plan, but you got to be very careful on how you word that, because
Exactly.
it does confuse people.
I used to call it my wish list to Santa. It's my kids' list to Santa.
There you
That's
go.
their CIP. I want this, this, and this, but doesn't mean they're gonna get it.
Yeah, I was just, wanted to give just a few minutes.
her.
This is the booklet, I wanted to kind of walk you through it so you understood how it was organized. On page 3, we have a summary, which sort of lays it all out in general terms, and it includes all of the recommendations from the CIP committee for the various departments. And the CIP recommendation is highlighted in the center in yellow. And the CIP committee's recommendations are also included in yellow next to it. Just to give you an idea of what these things mean by department, the first column, B, is what's currently in the capital reserve fund, and that's as of September 1st. What we currently have for funds that have been allocated in previous years and have not been spent yet. Then in C, D, and E, we have some historical data to show you what the requests were in 2000, or the approved budget was in 2015, 2016, and 2017. In column F, we have what the departments requested, and I through M are 5 years of going forward in the future of what those items would be per year to complete the 6-year CIP. We also have on that form the priority rankings at the bottom, which describe what they are. In the next couple of pages, pages 5 through 7, we have a breakout by project and by year of all the 4 through, excuse me, should be 4 through 7, 5 through 7.
Took me a second to figure out why page 4 and page 7 seem to be exactly the same.
They're not. Okay, page 4, 5, and 6 is what is being requested by the departments. And 7, 8, and 9 is what is recommended by the CIP committee. So if you compare the figures, you'll see that they made some reductions, and I'll just kind of highlight them. On page 8, there were some reductions in the requests from the library. There were some reductions in requests from recreation. And I think that was it. And basically, they recommended that those items be considered under this new capital maintenance fund that Greg was referring to. And then following, I've broken up by department all the forms that were submitted to us, which include a description of the project, nice photograph, how it's going to improve service here in the community or lower operating costs, whether it's a replacement item or not, where the source for the cost data came from. And then there's that financing plan we talked about before, which shows how is this going to be funded to the tune of, for example, PW2, which is stormwater improvements on New Road. How is this going to be funded over time? And of course, you see that it's going to extend beyond 6 years because it's an expensive project. It will cost almost $1 million. So that may be a good candidate for a bonding project that the town may consider. So that's how that works. And if you go further along, let's see if I can find one that shows the equipment. I can't find it. Bear with me. Facilities, here's a budget. Okay, I guess I'm going to pick on Public Works. PW1 shows all the equipment that the Public Works Department currently has and what year it was acquired, the cost at the time, what the replacement year is, mileage on the equipment, and a 6-year plan, requesting capital and reserve funds in order to help finance the cost of those. And if you go down to the bottom, you'll see how much money is in the capital reserve fund currently, and what the items are proposed to be replaced in the next fiscal year. So it does provide a lot of good information that can be useful to the town council as you prepare your budget and do your budget deliberations, but also as you review requests that come in the future from the departments when they are hoping to release those funds, so they can spend them.
One suggestion I'd make is to put another number on the pages so that through the whole thing, because it's hard when you're trying to bring everybody to the same spot.
Well-
It's not immediately clear where PW is in the.
It's right at the bottom of the page. We spent a lot of time grouping them together so you know that it's a public works
Right, no, I wouldn't
project.
take, you could keep the P2, the P, something like that, but I don't know whether PW is towards the beginning or the end of that.
There's also a table of contents.
Okay. I still think a number would be good.
I had the numbers, it's just,
I second that.
we try to organize it by department, but we can do that in the future. We did that last year. Just, in any event, it's a lot of work organizing something like this.
I recognize that there's a lot of work there. The only, well, I'll let you go first, and then I have.
Just, I know that the codes at the top of each of the individual worksheets, like the PWs, the Rs, those worksheets were evaluated, and there were updates, quite a few updates by the CIP committee. Are those reflected here?
We don't,
Or these are the originals? Or,
we did not change, on a per-project basis, we did not change all those.
just wanted to understand that. So we'll refer to the numbers on, like, page 3.
Right.
Right?
Those are the numbers that the departments gave us early on. And the CIP committee put their recommendations and we included on the summary sheet.
Right.
They didn't go through each and every project.
In case someone noticed a discrepancy between those, that explains it, that these are the originals and the recommendations up front. Okay.
The other comment I was going to make was just sort of commenting from the standpoint of what some of the things that have happened in terms of this document represents the school as well as the town. And the school is not under our purview, but I think it is in line with the whole conversation about shared service and sort of how we, the level of cooperation that goes on between the town administrator and the school superintendent. They are, I think, the school is using the, I would say, more engaged with the CIP, capital improvement plan. You know, the trend is towards greater engagement from the school within the capital improvement plan process. And I think it's one of the things that I think was positive this time for the capital improvement committee was that the school sort of agreed to move up their schedule a little earlier, because in the past, I think as I understand it, there would be, because the deadlines were different from the school and the town, they would go through the town process first and then the school process. And this year they were able to do that as one process. So I kudos to the school and the superintendent and to Greg.
Facility
He pointed
director
to.
pulled it off.
Right, because that is an example of really increasing efficiency. The other thing that is a little bit different about how the school in town works, and I'm not saying that one is better or other, but I understand it to be different, and I'm learning as we go, is that when we see the capital improvement plan numbers, recommendations for contributions to capital reserve funds on the town side, we see numbers before the town administrator has made his changes. That's the way it works.
Mhm.
On the school side, what happens is the recommendations that come to the CIP have already gone through the superintendent. So the administrative input into that process happens before it goes to the, is that?
Well, that's true, and part of it is that But the school is treated just like any other department. And rather than it coming from the administration, it's coming from the school board. And they've chosen to
Correct.
have the school board vet the process.
I have multiple
that way.
departments that report to me. The school is considered, in the CIP process, a department. Because they're requesting impact fees. They're the same as fire or police or anybody else. And I don't edit the school one, I don't have that authority, but I do have it for the other departments.
Right. I'm not saying that
Yeah.
it's good or bad, I was just saying it was interesting to understand that's how that works. And I think that does set us up. Hopefully, everybody found that useful for our further discussions as we go into the budget period.
Very good. Okay.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Thank you.
Okay.
I thought that was a nice audit.
Next up, are there any committee reports?
I was saying we just had a big one, so.
I think we covered that one, yeah. Anyone else?
Yep.
Councilor Burns?
Quick one, and it's actually on our agenda for later this evening. So the planning board met and approved the amendments to the chapter 32 zoning. So, and that's in our first reading in a little while, so we'll have more discussions on that in the future, I'm sure.
Councilor Wentz?
I just have another committee report. So the budget committee met and basically just went through our calendar for the rest of the budget season, and I just wanted to give a few dates because I think that's probably important. So, let's see. The town administrator will give the budget to the budget committee by November 15th. November 27th will be the first working session to review the town budget. December 4th will be the working session to review the proposed school district budget, with another date of December 11th if needed. December 18th will be the town budget public hearing. And January 8th will be the school district budget public hearing and a public hearing on any petition warrants. And let's see, we're assuming February 3rd will be the most likely date of the deliberative session. And that's it.
Thank you. Okay. Are we, town council consider, that's under new business, okay. So right now, the next one up, I'm struggling with the order here. 16, back here. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, the next up is Resolution 2017-18-15, which is resolution for town council chamber dais improvements. Whereas the existing council chamber dais, electrical cabling, and audio systems are in need to updating, as well as the overall appearance, and whereas the Director of Facilities has solicited proposals from several contractors for the repairs to systems and structure, and whereas the existing systems are experiencing operational malfunctions, now therefore let it be resolved by the Newmarket Town Council that Town Council authorizes the town administrator to enter into an agreement with Educational Building Consultants, Access AV, and Daniels Electric for Town Council dais improvements with a costing not to exceed $10,000 utilizing INET funds, Fund 17, INET Fund 17. Current balance is $27,385. Go ahead.
Oh, you made a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve Resolution 2017-2018-15.
Second.
explain. As you're aware, we've been having some issues with the microphones and other, for those at home don't realize it, there's pretty much a rat's nest of wires underneath here. So we're going to be replacing the wires for the microphones, as well as providing outlets and improving the wiring just throughout the dais at all. It will also do some redesign of the front of this as well. The fund that we're using is an old cable capital reserve fund that was set up. There was two. One is called the INET. That was an institutional network fund, pre-Wi-Fi, that they were trying to do institutional network through the poles, but we can use it. It came from cable funds. In this sense, it's all for the cable improvement. That's where these funds are coming from.
Councilor Bowden.
So I guess looking at the quotes here, you have the Access AV. I don't see one for Daniels Electric unless.
I'll let the facilities director.
I can answer that one.
But as far as the actual quote, I see one for Access AV for 3204, and that was reduced. That was reduced to 2600.
Correct.
Okay. So the educational building consultants. It's
The facilities director can answer the question.
I'm just trying to get to my question here.
Yeah.
So that's 5,400, and where's the data for Daniels Electric?
If you look at our staff report, we did an in-house estimate for the costing of that based on a not to exceed, because the generalized scope won't be finalized until we actually take the top off of this to see where our cable running is going to happen. So one of the things that I do is do an estimate on what it will cost to have these particular services done. And so in Daniels Electric, which is our electrical contract that we use for both the schools and the town, I come up with a cost estimate for the work that's going to be done based on my experience as an electrician. So it's kind of how we do it. And sometimes one of the hard parts that happen with a lot of contractors, and me being part of one, is getting calls to do estimates, getting estimates and estimates and estimates and estimates, and then the work doesn't happen. So one of the things that I try to do is do a cost analysis for certain parts of it. Again, experience of doing this for like 34 years, and also the fact that we use a lot of what's called RS Means, which is a national company that allows us to kind of target certain things. And so instead of asking all of our contractors to come in and give a price on something that we don't know if it's going to happen or not, I'll do some of those estimates in-house and then utilize them for those particular services.
We get a lot of contractors, when we ask for proposals, just say no, because they don't want to waste their time and not be awarded the bid. We're finding that, and all municipalities are finding that now, because they do all the work for the proposal and they don't get it because they're not the lowest. So, I mean, I can tell you, I've heard it many times for painting, I've heard it times for other maintenance issues. So it's very difficult for us now to get quotes because they just don't want to. They're busy. They don't need the work right now because it's a good economy, and they just don't get the jobs after. So we have to figure another way to do it.
I'm struggling to get contractors right now to even return my calls to get work done. It's been really tough. We had two contractors come in and look at this, and one of them said, basically, I don't have time and I'm not interested. And just finding somebody even to come in and talk to me about some of this stuff has been difficult, to say the least. That's why you're seeing two estimates, or maybe in this particular case, for instance, where I only had one estimate that actually got turned in. And the reason that this particular contractor is interested in doing work for us is because they're already doing work for us now. So it's a continuation of work that they can currently just move right forward with. So it's
odds are in the
tough.
future, what we'll probably do is go out and get proposals to have a town electrical firm and just go to them from now on. because it's easier to say, hey, look, we'll do X amount of work with you if you do it, but you've got to be on hand for this, because it's just, we're not getting people.
Yeah, and that is the trend now, is to go out to those bid process for a general service. You're paying this much per hour and this kind of markup, and then they become, if you want to call it, the preferred contractor. And those are, again, fall into those wonderful smaller jobs that we've been talking about earlier, where it's a $2,000 electric job, getting out there to look at 3 different quotes and pulling in all those people and trying to get estimates for it is getting to be a big challenge. And we're using Daniels upstairs right now and did the same processes. They're the ones who are dealing with our knob and tube issue. And I think this particular project is also a great example of one of those projects as a whole that falls into that new category we're requesting. Because it isn't a $50,000 capital improvement item. It's a $10,000 job. I also can answer on the reduction. We changed some of the microphone systems that we were originally going to use. We actually did some testing on some wireless mic systems, rack-mounted systems. That cost us less money to purchase than what we were going with. So we actually set up the system here to test it, and it operated down to a rack that's located in our AV space that we have here. So that's why we were able to reduce that cost.
Yeah, going to take a couple of council questions. Council Weinstein?
My question is just about the funding, and I was wondering if there's any issue in using those INET dollars for the aesthetic piece of it.
No.
No, because it would be like, I hate to say it this way, but you're basically building a set. This is what it is. It's a set so that counts as cable.
Okay.
I have to take the whole top off of this dais to be able to do the work, so I have to put something back. So it's kind of that situation involved in it.
Council Thompson?
The electric piece,
Mhm.
and I completely understand what you've been doing. That's been my business for 30 years. So I'm aware of the means and the estimating, but here's the thing. On that piece being an estimate, and that piece being estimated at about 2,000, that's below the threshold that the town administrator could doesn't need our approval for.
Correct. Actually, each one of these individually, if you take them individually, it's below the town administrator's
Right. So,
authorization limit.
do you need authorization from the council to withdraw up to $2,000 for Daniels Electric from the INET?
It means each individually, no, we can do one withdrawal not to exceed 10,000 for the project. And that's one of those things that, since this is one project, I wouldn't separate those. I would say if this project came in, as the director mentioned, that yes, each individual one is under mine, but the whole project is over what I can do, I'd still come to the council because that's one project, and I think that's going around it the wrong way. The project is what we need.
Agree with you. Thank you.
What I'm thinking is that I'm not entirely, I understand what you do, but the costs could come in less, but they could come in more and whatever. I didn't know if there was room for a friendly amendment here to take Daniels out of it. Go ahead and do the rest of it as far as that goes. I mean, does that cripple you? Is that just sort of unnecessary? I just don't like doing it without, they should have put in a quote because they're already here and it's part of that project, the same as EBC did. They were willing to do it because they were already working here. Daniels could have done the same thing, and I just
one
think
of the
for a
areas
process.
that upstairs where we're doing that remodeling right now is a great example of we ran into live knob and tube.
Right.
I don't see that here, but then again, I don't know either. This shouldn't be that of that age, but in this case, when we're trying to put these jobs together and build these jobs, in some cases, it's better for us, timing-wise and moving forward-wise, is to do those in-house estimates.
Oh, yeah, I completely understand that. You're asking me to vote on something that could have had the backup one of the contractors, my point is, they're, both contractors are here.
Mhm.
One of them took the time to give you a piece of paper and one of them didn't.
Well,
So I'm just wondering, I'm just not entirely comfortable.
yeah, and I understand. In this particular case, we have, Daniels has looked at this. When I brought him in for the other project also. To give you an example, where we're going with this, and where I'm going with this is the knob and tube removal. I don't expect the actual cost analysis from them for another 2 weeks. Because they're also in the same situation of very busy and able to get quotes out. So we're trying to keep their person who's working on the site be able to continue to work here, but maybe not necessarily have to have that estimate right up front, just for timing's sakes.
Okay.
Councilor Bowden?
What other types of projects could be currently use the INET fund for?
Only things to do with cable. But we also have a cable capital reserve fund that's separate that we fund with the franchise fees.
All the things that have to do with cable.
Yep.
I believe when I looked into this fund, it hadn't had a withdrawal for over a year from it, so I'm not sure what the last time it was actually tapped.
I'm trying to remember if it's been since I've been here. It's one of those old funds that are there and then that would like to get off the books if it's not being used, and this is one of the ways to do it, is start doing some of the projects that we have for the cable.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Seeing no other questions, I guess we can call the roll.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Nay.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-1.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. Next, we have nominations and appointments for the Newmarket Community Development Committee?
It's actually corporation.
Corporation, I thought it might be. Carl Blackstone for a term that expires December 2019. Can I accept a motion to appoint Carl Blackstone?
I'll make a motion to accept, to appoint Carl Blackstone to the NCDC.
Second.
Any comments? Please call the roll.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
Next, we have, I'd like a motion to appoint William Turner to the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee for a term that expires 2020.
I'll make a motion to appoint William Turner to the Energy and Environment Committee for a term to expire March 2020.
Second.
Any comments?
I'll make a comment. I know Bill, and I think that, and this goes to actually both of these appointments, Dan Smith also, I think that there's a lot of enthusiasm actually around this committee, so I'm excited to accept his nomination and Dan Smith's also, so.
Call the roll, please.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
And as previously mentioned, the next motion that I need is to appoint Daniel Smith to the Energy and Environment Advisory Committee for a term that expires March 2020.
Make a motion to appoint Dan Smith to the Energy and Environment Committee for a term to expire March 2020.
Second.
Any comments? Further comments? Seeing none, call the roll, please.
Counselor Burns.
Aye.
Counselor Finch.
Aye.
Counselor Thompson.
Aye.
Counselor Cast.
Aye.
Counselor Bowden.
Aye.
Counselor Weinstein.
Aye.
Counselor Pike.
Aye.
Motion passes 7-0.
And I have a couple of resolutions and ordinances for their first reading, starting with Resolution 2017-18-16, authorizing the town administrator to enter into a contract with educational building consultants for town hall office improvements Whereas it has been determined that our town hall requires improvements for ADA access, office safety measures, and operational synergies, and whereas the Department of Facilities, the Director of Facilities requested proposals based on provided designs to make improvements, and whereas the town received the following proposal: educational building consultants, $11,350, and Daniels Electric, parentheses, in-house estimate for $1,650, and whereas the town administrator recommends that the town enter into an agreement with educational building consultants of Standish, Maine. Now therefore be it resolved by the Newmarket Town Council that the town council authorizes the town administrator to enter into an agreement with educational building consultants to make town hall office improvements based on an amount not to exceed $13,000, utilizing funding from the Building Improvement Capital Reserve Fund. And next up, we have...
I would suggest you just read it by title only.
Next up, ordinance number 1, 2017-18. Amendments to Chapter 32 zoning of the Newmarket Municipal Code regarding New Road Skilled Nursing Facility District.
And this will be going to a public hearing at the next meeting.
Okay. Is there any correspondence to the town council? Or closing comments by town councilors?
So I have a couple things. The first is that on, let me look at the date. Now, as I say it, I want to make sure I have the right date. So October 21st, there's going to be a craft fair at the Sunrise Sunset Center. And there are, I think, 15 different artisans will have items there for sale. It's a benefit for the Sunrise Sunset Center. Their craft group has worked really hard, so they'll have a table, and they're going to have lots of different items that they've been making over the course of the last several months. So I encourage people to go. I believe it starts at 9 o'clock. And it should be a nice event. There's going to be a bake sale. So it's a nice group of people who will be there. The other item that I just wanted to mention, I wanted to talk briefly about what Monica presented to us. And I have had the opportunity to go to a couple of these Mindful Mondays events at the Stone Church. And the last one was about this amendment and the movement toward that process that I don't fully understand. And I plan to learn more about it. But what struck me in that process was this group of people who really didn't have any basis for understanding local government, and they didn't know that we met on the first and third Wednesday. I mean, really kind of basic. And so when they talked about having local control and wanting to be more involved in local government, I said, you guys have lots of opportunities to be involved in local government. And so when she talked about me maybe presenting something, that's where my mind went, is letting people know the structure. I mean, and these are primarily younger people. So letting them know what the structure of our local government is and just ways that they can get involved. So when I sort of have a date for that, I will certainly let everybody know. It's a really informal setting. Obviously, it's at the Stone Church. And anything that I can do to reach out and fill some seats, I'm happy to do. So.
Does that mean beer is available?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
It
it is.
Now it'll sound like I'm volunteering for that, but I do go and speak to other organizations in town because there's a lot of misconceptions also about what can and cannot be done, and so I'd be more than willing to go as well.
Great.
So.
I know it was mentioned in the last meeting, but now it's happened, and I just wanted to note the closing of Morales. Wow, I'm a little verklempt.
That's really sad.
Yeah, she retired.
It
Yeah.
is. And it's
Any other comments? closing, going. Our next council meeting is October 18th, and with that, seeing no other business, we are adjourned.